This 3 versus 1 fight is part of my slicer series. First I will show you the entire fight, then we walk through it step by step to analyze it. Let us look at the fits flown first. My opponents were flying classic kite slicers, agile, fast and still packing a deadly punch at 20 km with pulse lasers and scorch. I was flying my brawling slicer, fitted with an afterburner, a web and beam lasers. This fit excels in flexibility, it is able to fight at both short, medium and long range against most frigates and destroyers. It does about 230 damage with heat at 20 to 24 km, and still has a good tank with about 4,500 effective hit points and a repair ability of nearly 100 DPS as long as you have paced. If you compare the stats side by side, you can see that the kite slicer has the edge in speed and application. Pulses track almost twice as good as beams, even with scorch loaded. But in terms of tank and raw damage output, my slicer is nearly 40% better than the kite slicer. Okay, now let's look at the fight in more detail. As you can see, the hostile slicer comes in at 11 km, but I already have my Xray S crystals loaded, which shoot out to 24 km. This is because most slicer pilots instinctively start the fight by hitting orbit at 20 km. I expect this pilot to do the same. As expected, he is orbiting me with his micro-warp drive on at 20 km. Because the micro-warp drive multiplies his signature by 4, the application advantage is now with me. Before, he was able to track twice as well as I did, now I am able to track twice as well, causing me to inflict much better hits. I am manually piloting to keep moving at an angle to exploit my application advantage. I only now start my repairer, knowing that as long as I keep moving, it should keep up with the damage. His tank is failing and he moves out of range to repair while the second slicer comes in. I switch to the second slicer because I am too slow to chase the first one down with my afterburner. I see the other slicer closing to 8 km. I believe he switched crystals and wants to move in for the kill. I start switching crystals myself, but he is moving back to 20 km. It may have been a feint, or perhaps a mistake, but I lose valuable damage. Both hostile slicers go close. That helps me because they still have their micro-warp drives on. Hitting me at close range at high speed is even harder than hitting me at 20 kilometers. Remember, if you fight a kite slicer with your own slicer, never use your own micro-warp drive until the opponent tries to escape. One warps out, the other remains close and cuts his micro-warp drive. I keep shooting with long-range crystals, it takes too much time to switch. I count on my superior tank and damage to take him out, using the Webifier to make him easier to hit. A third one comes in while I'm nearly out of capacitor and hit points. This one is smart enough not to use his micro-warp drive, but that means I can dictate range. He shoots at me with conflagration crystals but I am just outside of his optimal range. Frustrated, he pulses his micro-warp drive, causing my guns to hit harder and his guns to suddenly miss. He commits suicide. Even better, the sight completes just as I destroy him. Quadruple victory.